going to get started with the kickoff. So if you've been to other ones, you've heard this before, but for those of you who this is your first event, we want to make sure to officially welcome you to the 5th annual Austin Design Week. My name is Danielle Barnes. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of the co-founders and organizers of Austin Design Week. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you here today. So you'll notice some social sharing icons on this introductory screen. We really encourage you to share what you learn on social and to tag us. Take screenshots, take pictures, share your favorite quotes, and be sure to tag us and we'll reshare you. You can head to the next slide. So there are events happening all week. You might have gone to some already, but if not, I hope that you will check them out. You can head to that bit.ly link that you see there and explore the schedule and see what else is going on. Every event is free at Austin Design Week and things are happening all day, all night, mostly virtual this year. A couple of events in person, like our Design Circle socially distanced conversation happening the next 2 mornings. Lots to check out. I also recommend that if you haven't already, that you join the Slack channel. So there's a really great workspace where we have all folks from Austin Design Week, attendees, hosts, volunteers, and you can introduce yourself. You can share what you've learned in the different sessions and get announcements and updates. Next slide. And then finally, before I hand this off to our wonderful host today, I just want to say a big thank you to our partners. I've shared before, Austin Design Week is completely volunteer run. It's a free event, and that's thanks to all of our volunteers, our hosts, our community partners, and also our sponsors that you see here. So big shout out to them. We will be sending out a survey at the end of this event, and we'd love to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback, and we hope that you enjoy this awesome workshop, and we can't wait to hear about it. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Catherine and Laura.
Hey all, well, thank you for joining us at Austin Design Week and Austin Design Week. Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here. I know there's still a couple people probably flowing in. This will be an interactive session. So as we're kind of just introducing ourselves and setting up, if you can grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, there's going to be some activities that you could follow along with a little bit later in the session. And the other thing that we ask is that wherever you are in your space, if you're in your home or wherever you might be, make sure to sit somewhere where you're physically and emotionally comfortable. This is going to come up later in our interactive activities as well. So I'll repeat that one more time a little bit later for folks, joining us, but I think we can sort of just dive right in. Again, welcome. This is the session Becoming Digital Sherlocks, Uncovering Insights in Remote Research. So I'm Laura Gallos. I'm Design Research and Strategy Lead at Modernist Studio here on the east side of Austin.
And I'm Catherine Woodowis, a design strategist also with Modernist.
Modernist is a strategy, design, and innovation consultancy. And our job is to help our clients create exceptional products, services, and teams. So a lot of times that means digging in deep to research, finding those unexpected insights, and that's really what we're going to be focused on today. I'll let Sherlock introduce himself. As he says in The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, my name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what others don't know. So as dramatic as that sounds, knowing what other people don't know, or observations that are counterintuitive or going against the grain of common assumptions. These things underpin a lot of our work as designers or just as creative people in general, no matter what industry that we're in. It sounds difficult knowing what other people don't know, like maybe you have to be the smartest person in the room, or I think Sherlock thinks that he's probably the smartest person in the whole world, but you really don't have to be. It's just that if you have watched the movies or read the books or seen the TV versions of the show, Sherlock is just using methods that are really available to everyone. One of those TV renditions has this quote that I really like. A good detective knows that every task, every interaction, no matter how seemingly banal, has the potential to contain multitudes. If you've done ethnographic research in the past, I think that probably resonates with you. If you haven't, that's totally fine too. It's research based mainly on the observation of what people do. It's sometimes also called design research. A lot of times what people do is really different than what people say. And we can learn a lot, and people reveal a lot by the way they express themselves, their actions and behaviors. And doing this kind of research always helps us ground our design work in real problems, habits and behaviors that people have or do. So the secret ingredient in this kind of research is knowing how to see the meaning in these certain behaviors. As Sherlock puts it kind of critically to Watson, you see, but you do not observe. So we're going to talk about what gets in the way, specifically with something that we've all been dealing with, which is this kind of remote context that we find ourselves in. What gets in the way because of that, of truly observing during remote research, or even just remote connections, like all the Zoom calls that we're having all the time. We're going to put some Sherlock-inspired tools in our toolkits and try to break down some of those connections, those barriers, to connections and insights. And just to kind of give a flavor of even the type of research that we're talking about, this is actually a picture from some of our field research, in which we kind of go to people's houses or homes and actually kind of look at people's stuff in their lives and try to find clues about their mindsets and habits and actions. So I don't know, this is sort of a rhetorical question. You can put your hand up in the chat if you want. Who's tried to snoop on a bookcase behind somebody during COVID, during quarantine? I know that I have. And always, right? It's fascinating, just from the books behind somebody, you can see what their influences are. I know a lot of times when we've been sort of looking at that bookshelf trend, it's like what politics somebody has, or even their credibility, right? And at this point, I think we're all familiar with the trend. And so the bookcases are becoming really curated. And so it's like, what does someone want to project about themselves by using that bookcase? So we'll get into sort of that over curation a little bit later in the session too. But anyway, this picture came from in-field research pre-COVID. So often, when we're doing research, whether it's remote or not, we're looking for those clues into a person's goals, mindsets, and habits. And this photo too came from research, and it's such a small thing, but it's just a little play space in the corner of somebody's home. And it's details like this plug that you see here that make us really curious and kind of spark our thinking about who lives here and what kind of resources they might have access to, and the creativity of the person who took this blank space to draw. In this case, it was a child, to draw with some markers and crayons. I would say that Sherlock finds a lot of meaning in these details, right? So he would say it's, of course, just a trifle. It's something that normally we would just pass over without really assigning it any meaning. But there's nothing so important as trifles. So that's sort of words to live by as we go through the activities in this session. So we're going to get to it. Here's the goals for today. For the next almost hour and a half, we're going to spend some time together embracing new practices while we're all safely distant. Specifically, we'll get into troubleshooting some of the things that Catherine and I have found that are kind of barriers in remote research and remote connection. Things like self-consciousness, things like misalignment, and then things like barriers to interpreting the environment through the kind of constrained focus of the laptop camera.
Great. So when conducting research or an interview, the key to getting really valuable research is the ability to spot meaning and observe clues among the many, many pieces of data that you're collecting about a person, their emotions, their behavior, the environment that they're in. That's a challenge anytime, but it's a special challenge right now when we are remote. We're not able to be in the same room as somebody. We're not able to personally, physically pick up on behavioral cues, somebody's full context, et cetera. So what are some things we can practice to help us spot meaning? One very popular Sherlock story in the BBC show, it sees him on a case of reported sightings of a very large animal. And a man is found dead out in a moor, and people are really afraid of this large being that sort of shows up at night. And Sherlock largely dismissed this case as nonsense until a young man described to him what he had seen about the animal's footprints. And the young man said, "Mr. Holmes, they were the footprints of a gigantic hound." So Sherlock's ears kind of perked up at this because hound is a very archaic word, especially for a young man to be using. And so something about that word choice struck him as very strange. And he wasn't quite sure why or what it meant, but he followed up that little inkling, that intuition of something being unusual with a lot of questions and ended up taking the case. So most of us in our research and interviewing processes are not going to be taking on a case like to the degree of Sherlock, but we can use the same technique of noticing some things that are a little odd or a little unusual or a little surprising. And that can help us open up new avenues of conversation, building understanding and establishing some context with our participants. So that can work even with something pretty small or ordinary. For example, here is a team call that we had just last week. And this is me on this phone call. And I was giving a status update on a project and suddenly realized that everyone had kind of gone quiet and were looking a little bit confused. And then they all started typing at once. It turns out, I don't know if any of y'all can take a look at this screen and think about maybe what would make Sherlock curious about this.
Ryan's got it.
Okay, great.
In the chat.
Yeah.
Too many knives.
Too many knives. So yeah, it turns out I had totally unthinkingly just walked into my kitchen. I was taking a call from the counter and looked down and it just said Slack. Several people are typing and everyone was like, what is the deal with these knives floating over your shoulder? And because they asked what this was about, because my colleagues noticed that and said, wait a minute, this is something that seems a little bit unusual. We got to talking about how magnets can be used as a form of vertical storage, all the different tools I used in the kitchen when I'm cooking, how my housemate's an engineer and he loves building modular furniture to kind of maximize space. And it just became this discussion about life and living that was quite apart from the project that we were talking about. And all of that just came out of my colleagues taking a minute to observe what was on screen, spotting something a little bit unusual or surprising, and then asking about it. So I am willing to bet that most of us here at some point in these months and months of video calls have noticed something about people behaving a little bit differently, a little bit surprisingly, or something unusual. So we'd love to hear from you. What are some things that have surprised you about what you've seen or observed, especially things that felt unnatural on a video call that you've been on in the last few months?
You guys could put that in the chat and I'll start, sort of synthesizing what we're hearing. I have some notes already in our Miro slides here, just based on what we've been talking about, noticing people curating their backgrounds with those bookshelves, or in Catherine's case, not curating their backgrounds. And then there's something weird to talk about. What have you guys been noticing about, remote technology and the way that we're interacting with each other these days? Ooh, public eating in meetings. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I see that one.
Mm-hmm.
What else there? Oh, interactions off screen. Good point. It's funny how people get self-conscious or like totally not self-conscious. Children, kids needing to shout at someone in the background. Monologues. Oh yeah. One of the sort of curating the backgrounds I have seen, someone said in the chat, there is like the minimalism. I guess maybe we don't want our privacy sort of invaded in that way for some of us. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, everybody. Ew, bathroom's gross. Leaving the camera off, that is an interesting one.
Yeah, the ability to choose whether you're seen or not. That's interesting.
Multitasking.
Has anyone seen really funny kind of artificial backgrounds?
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
The Zoom tailored backgrounds.
Sorry if I don't get yours. I'm trying to synthesize and look and type at the same time. Never really seeing their eyes. Yeah, I'm actually having a hard time with that myself right now. So I know I should be looking at the green light, but there's a lot going on. Get that.
Anything else? Has anyone seen like a physical object that's very funny? I know actually you have a story about that, Laura.
I don't know if I do, but Catherine seems to have the best backgrounds. Aside from the knives, she also had a situation where someone walked behind her with a chainsaw. So I
live in a very active environment.
It's scary.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think we have a couple of, kind of key areas here. There's the idea of people curating their backgrounds, not curating their backgrounds. There's self-consciousness. There's moments of unself-consciousness, like we sort of forget that people are watching us and maybe we're yelling at kids across the room or doing something that, you know, normally we wouldn't show in front of coworkers. Or maybe we want to just leave the camera off and not really deal with that cognitive burden of processing all of that while we're trying to have a conversation.
And I think what this can reveal is that there is a degree of self-consciousness when we introduce the screen. And some people shut down entirely, kind of don't want to be seen, would like to still interact at a remove. And other people sort of, as we see, just act normally as if things are even more casual than before. And so what that creates is that can affect rapport or a sense of trust when your expectations versus what you're getting are misaligned from either us as researchers and interviewers or others as participants. This can also create a really interesting kind of power dynamic between the interviewer and interviewee that can sometimes get in the way of establishing the trust and empathy needed between a researcher and a participant. Similarly with backgrounds, particularly curated minimalism or artificial backgrounds and others they can obscure a person's real environment. And this sort of over curation can lead us to a lack of insight about the person's context, how they move in a space and what's important to them.
Cool. So we have collectively identified a lot of hiccups and barriers to remote research and remote connection. In part 2, we're going to try out some methods to help us work through some of those more unnatural feeling parts. So one big problem that at least Catherine and I have noticed in our research work, and I think it's reflected in some of the comments that you left, is how self-conscious people can get when the laptop lens is on them. And I keep saying laptop, but it could be any device or whatever technology that you're using, just using shorthand. And then, you know, misalignment that can happen with co-creation or without co-creation. I think those two things are related because the more we're thinking about ourselves, you know, and how we're coming off or how our participant might be, you know, a little unnerved about the camera, the more we're focused on those internal aspects than what the conversation is about. And so what we're proposing is having an element of co-creation to kind of get out of thinking about ourselves and more about hearing each other, really. So poor Watson is always here listening to Sherlock, and he's always there as a sounding board, even when Sherlock doesn't really fully appreciate what Watson is doing there for him. But the way Watson can reflect information back to Sherlock sometimes helps Sherlock see things that even he didn't really see before. And so that's kind of the concept behind what we're talking about in terms of co-creating and overcoming those barriers. As designers, I know that we have a lot of ways of co-creating already with either participants or people on our design teams or our stakeholders. In this remote context, the benefits of doing this are even greater because not only are we kind of getting that additional perspective and creativity, but we're also creating connections with one another. So we're gonna do a little bit of an activity right now. We just need one person to volunteer, and you can put a hand up in the channel or you can say me in the channel, however you wanna do it. And what we're gonna ask is for 30 or 60 seconds, you're just gonna talk through what you've done today since noon, just as if you were a research participant, you know, engaging in some of our research. So does anybody in the chat want to volunteer? It'll be relatively painless, I promise.
I could volunteer.
Who's that? Dondi?
Dondi.
Good to meet you, Dondi. Thank you so much for being our brave soul. Okay, so for about 30 or 60 seconds, just, you know, tell us about the events of your day since noon and how they felt.
Okay, so you said since 12 o'clock. Okay, so I had lunch and then I had a doctor's appointment and then I came back and then did I'm trying to remember one of the Ready Set Go anime with Ami. Sorry, I'm really messing this up for you. I'm sorry. Went to appointment, had lunch, took my dog out for a walk, and then came back, did some schoolwork, looked up research internship opportunities, and then went over some more schoolwork, ate some snacks, and then got ready to get ready for some project stuff I have to do for by tomorrow morning. And then went on another walk with my dog and fed her snacks for her medicine that she takes with food. And then started doing a little bit of cleaning, and then started getting ready for the Ready Set Animate. That was like around 4.
We could pause
Sorry.
there.
Sorry, I didn't say that in the best order.
It was
Thank you
perfect.
for volunteering.
Thank you for volunteering. If I can ask you a little bit deeper question, how did it feel to just recount your day for me over this Zoom platform, I guess with a lot of people in it and that sort of context?
I guess like I'm always like first want to volunteer for something, but then just to get my nerves up. But then once I start talking, inside my head, I start losing track of my thoughts of what I'm trying to say. So it's like I could hear it, but it's not coming out in the order that I wanted to, and maybe out of nervousness, but it's all, for experience and, having a good time and learning. But for me, and, specifically, I think it's something that I get excited about talking about things and just like being in the spotlight, even if I don't do it well. Self-humiliation, I guess, and humor. But it was enjoyable to be able to talk, but then there's also like however many 100-something people watching this, and how it was simple of a thing how it could be to just say what you did from 12 o'clock, but then once I started talking, it just didn't come out that way. And I guess a little bit of nerves, but and trying to remember everything once you get put on the spot, then it's like, wait, what did I do today?
Yeah, I feel all of that for you. Like, it's a mixed bag, you're sort of on stage. It's hard to remember sometimes the order of things that you're doing. You can get sort of at a point where you're hearing yourself in your head. There's this green light or whatever you're looking into kind of staring at you. You do want to participate, so it's quite a mixed bag of emotions. And I think that's a lot of times what a lot of people are feeling in remote conversations during meetings, and especially when we have research and participants kind of engaging in activities that they may not be super familiar with. It just kind of compounds all those emotions and sometimes difficulty getting out, what you're trying to express. So Donnie, you're not off the hook quite yet, if you don't mind. I want you to do what you did one more time, but we're going to do it in a little bit of a different way. We're going to take some cues from Sherlock. Okay. You're going to tell Catherine, my colleague here, the same thing, what you did since noon today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She's going to drive creating a map with you. This is a very simple journey map.
Okay.
And so if she does something wrong or it doesn't quite reflect your experience, feel free to just, tell her, where things should go or how they should be worded.
Yeah. So Donnie, let's start over again at the beginning. Okay, sure. So let's talk about what you've done since noon. And as Laura said, as you talk, I'll be filling this out and maybe asking you some follow-up questions about how you felt. And then if I'm getting anything wrong or missing anything, let me know, correct me. So okay. Let's start where you want to start.
Sure. So I think I said I had lunch.
Okay. And what was that? What was your sort of emotional temperature at that point? Maybe so-so?
Yeah, I guess I was okay. Like, pretty normal, I guess.
Okay. Okay, then what?
And then went to a doctor's appointment.
Okay.
And then got back home and took my dog for a walk.
Okay. Well, how would you say you were feeling around when you were going to your doctor's appointment? Where would that go?
Doctors aren't always the fun thing to do, so probably not the greatest.
Maybe down here, yeah.
I think just because like beyond my own whatever, to go to a doctor, it's like everything's going on with the pandemic. I don't like
sure.
Doctors already in general, but now with everything that's going on, it's like I'm more kind of like eerie of it. It's like you go and you see all the taped off seats everywhere, and they're all spread out, and then you see people not really paying attention and things like that, and trying to, I don't know. So not the greatest.
Maybe
thoughts.
down here.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Why not?
Not feeling so good. If that feels right, does that feel too?
Yeah. Sure. It's about. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
We can move back.
Looks good.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
So got back home. Took my dog for a walk.
Okay. How was that?
That was awesome.
Great. We got out of here.
Pandemic pet turned out to be awesome.
Well, that's great.
Talked about awesome design week with my neighbors outside. I think I forgot to say that earlier. Yeah. So I was excited about volunteering for some of the events and just talking about things I was interested in with design. And so yeah, that was exciting.
Okay. So that sounds also pretty high. Okay. So we're starting to get a little bit of a map here, a little bit of an emotional journey map of your day. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Looking a little bit like this.
So if I can just sort of, stop you there. Thank you again, Gandhi.
Okay.
Did this feel different than the first time you sort of talked about your day with us?
Definitely.
How so?
I think being asked questions, it made me think and kind of pause my thoughts, or like kind of what I did where I'm trying to like run off the thoughts of everything that happened all in one little. I feel like I was trying to cram everything before. And where I think with here, it's like I could kind of visualize and see as the dots are coming on the screen, even the little emoji faces to the left, I'm more visual. So I think seeing that in front of me, being asked things, I was able to, I guess, focus my thoughts better, and I could kind of think about my day slowly, and I guess have more structure and order to how my day was, and
that seems positive.
Answer the questions and what I did next, kind of like in frames, I guess. Like, so this was definitely a lot calmer.
Good. So instead of all that anxiety and sort of buzzing around and thinking different things, it was a lot more of a focused experience. I know from the outside perspective, Dondi, I felt like I learned a lot more about you than sort of the first time we were going through things. I learned about your thoughts on the pandemic. I learned about your relationship with your neighbors, the reason that you have a dog and how excited you are about your dog. Those are things that I don't think really would have come up if we had just continued in the vein of that first kind of interaction. So this is kind of typical of what we've been seeing in research. Thank you again. And I'm going to let you totally off the hook now. You're done with your volunteering. But this is kind of what we've been noticing in research generally. Me and Catherine, if you want to go to the next slide, is just this co-creation together, creating an artifact and really bringing attention onto that artifact rather than, on the dynamics with each other, or trying to, kind of hold everything in your head and also react to the technology that's kind of in our face. Minimizes self-consciousness from being on camera. It really cuts down on misalignment. And I think it empowers participants. Dondi can write no in the chat if it's not true, but I think it empowers participants a little bit to feel more of like an active and equal partner rather than really on the spot. So that's something that we can kind of put in our Sherlock toolkits in terms of the research we might be conducting, or even just, how we run meetings and connect with each other while we're doing this remote thing. So the second method is addressing the sort of over-curated environment that we've been talking about a little bit earlier in the session. So if you remember our bookshelf, it has become super curated. So a lot of people's meeting spaces in general have become super curated, whether it's super minimalist, which is what someone said in the chat earlier, or whether it's to try to, project some sort of image of ourselves that we want other people to have. So Sherlock also runs into this problem. He gets clues that intentionally kind of throw him off the scent from his enemies. So if you have read in the final problem, he and Watson are both fooled by a note that says there's a woman back at the hotel that they're staying at, and she needs medical attention right away. So of course, Watson rushes off to go help her. And pretty soon, Sherlock and Watson both realize that the note was a ruse left by Dr. Moriarty, which is Sherlock's arch nemesis, played by Andrew Scott right here. and it was meant to mislead them, and it worked. So as researchers, we really have to be wary of these red herrings that people are putting up and really curating the space and artifacts around them. So we did ask you to sit somewhere comfortable in your space, and this is where that sort of comes into play. Is there, we're going to be talking about artifacts and environment at this point. Is there someone else who wants to volunteer a little bit to talk about sort of the things in their space for about 30 or 60 seconds?
I guess I could go.
Rowan, or is it Rowan?
Rowan.
Rowan, thank you for volunteering. Yeah, so just take 30 or 60 seconds and tell us what we're seeing.
So I have art in the background above my bed, and then I'm sitting at a desk setup that has 2 desks intersecting in an L. And then I have art supplies and note-taking supplies strewn around me with pens and a thing of graph paper, a comfortable chair that's basically like a dining table chair that has padding. I have a giant window in front of me that would usually be letting in light, but has yellow curtains over it. I have a wardrobe that's open right next to me and a bookshelf a little bit further away from that. I have a full-length mirror right there. And then I have a poster for Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them up there. I have a trash can beneath that. I have a whiteboard that is supposed to have a calendar that I never keep up with. And I have a stack of books. I have Siddhartha, which I was reading, and Sorcery of Thorns, which is a fantasy book that just came out at the library that I finally got after waiting for a week on hold.
That's a wonderful portrait of sort of your interests and mindset. And I sort of feel like I got to know you in just 30 seconds. So we can see a lot of what you described, especially the art, and I see sort of part of that poster and the calendar that you don't keep up with. If you're comfortable with it, do you mind turning the laptop around and showing us the space?
Sure. This is the bedroom. This is the other side that has the bookshelf and the wardrobe.
Awesome. So in the chat, so we had 2 views from Rowan. We have the artist kind of background environment that we're looking at on Zoom. And then we got a glimpse into a lot of other spaces that she described, but we hadn't seen with our own eyes yet. Do you have a different perspective of Rowan just from those 2 views? You can say in the chat, if you could sum it up in one word, are they different? Are they the same? Are you surprised? Very tidy, yes. See what else here. So I feel like, I learned a lot from those 2 views. Definitely like in the first view that I saw, I had the sense of artist and sort of the working environment. And then honestly, it became a more domestic space for me. And I got to know a little bit about, I see your bedroom and your wardrobe, and these are things that are really personal, things that we sleep on, or things, the clothes that we wear and that touch our bodies and that sort of thing. Riyadh in the chat there says, the one that she isn't showing looks more comfortable. Yeah, it's a little bit softer, right? Less of the L-shaped right angle desk, and more of just sort of the comfortable living space. 2 uses of the bedroom, yep, for sure. And a more personal kind of aspect when we saw it than the first time. Rowan, thank you so much for sharing your space with us. I know that can be, kind of a personal thing, but when we do this, that's kind of what we were finding from research. If you want to scroll down to that finding, we can almost see it there. Asking people to capture their space as a whole really breaks out of that unidirectional view that the laptop kind of prescribes for us. We don't have to act the way that technology asks us to act. We can move around, we can give walking tours, we can move the laptop, we can turn it upside down, right? So we have to remember that we're humans and the technology doesn't, prescribe what we can learn about from one another. All right, very cool.
So at this point, we are going to put all of these methods into practice. As we do, this will be a small group activity. We'll move into some breakout rooms. And as we go through these, pay attention to the telling detail. What small choices in others' behavior, wording, or environment can help you understand them better or find a really interesting line of story to pursue. So at this point, we're going to put you all into some breakout rooms. This is participatory. but please feel empowered and like you have all the permission to tell your group if for any reason you don't feel comfortable participating as either observer or observee. Let's go for half of the groups trying method A and half of the groups trying method B. And we have some PDFs that we will share in the chat that basically show the same journey map that Dondi went through with us, and also have a little bit of a capture of the environment that Rowan talked us through. Once you have your team, pick a method, either method A or method B, and claim one of the boards, or I'm sorry, don't do that. Pick a method and refer to the PDFs that we're sharing in the chat, and work with your team to try to go through these methods. We're gonna try for, each group should volunteer one participant to do this. And then if you have extra time, either repeat that or move on to the next method that you didn't start with. That all makes sense? So Laura's dropping the PDFs in the chat. I would advise you guys to go ahead and save them.
So one technology note, we can't drop the PDFs unless someone knows how to do that, because it's not letting me.
Oh, okay.
But if we can't, why don't we put up on the screen those those models, those templates? Yeah. And I know I asked you all to grab a pen and paper. So if you want to copy down a little bit, kind of what we have here to use as a model. This one is method 1. So if you want to go ahead and make a real quick sketch of what we're seeing here.
Or you can take a screenshot if you don't have a pen and paper with you.
Yep, you can also take a screenshot if you're going to be working on a computer, that's fine too. Thanks, Michelle, for the advice. I'm not seeing that either. I think Zoom is making it give me a hard time. I don't have a file button, do you?
Yeah, I think you have to be on a newer version of Zoom.
Okay. Yeah, so take a screenshot of that and we'll do it that way. And then with your pen and paper, you can go ahead and in your groups kind of, use that to kind of explore more about each other. Mm-hmm. And then if you've got a screenshot of that, we also have the second method template.
So this is a little bit more, we went through this verbally with Rowan just now, but this template of the words that you would use to describe what you see about somebody in your group's background from their initial environment. And then as they sort of show this walking tour of their space, words that describe what you see as they're taking you through with a follow-up question. And we'll come back to these reflective questions in a moment too.
Sarah, good question. We did try to do that, and it means you have to join our studio workspace. And so it's difficult to have this many people kind of be joining. So I think we're just going to do screenshots for now, and then take your pen and paper. And once you're in your groups, you can use these as templates for kind of completing those activities. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex. That's helpful.
Okay. So if we're ready to go, then I will create these breakout rooms. Thank you so much, Alex. That's great. And we will send you all on your way. So it may take a few moments to take. So hold tight and we'll get you all in your breakout room shortly. Okay, great. Good to see you all. Welcome back. So we'd love to hear how that went. I know that there's a lot of us on this call, but I'd love to hear from a group who went through method A. So that's the journey map, sort of talking about your day and mapping it out. Is there a group, someone who wants to unmute and volunteer or volunteer in the chat to kind of tell us as a group how that went for you all?
We did method A.
Okay.
Let me share my screen.
Perfect, thank you.
So first off, can you see that?
Yeah,
yes,
that looks great.
That looks great, yep.
So what should I talk about? What are we interested in?
Show us what we're looking at here.
So our user research participant started the day and with a happy face emoji, waking up, And then she made lunch, noted that she loves to eat. So again, another happy face emoji. And she bought stamps at the pharmacy. There was no line, but it's like buying stamps. So not the most riveting activity. And then she visited her friend's apartment, which was a little bit of a low point because they had recently moved. And she was there to pick up a printer, which was heavy and needed to be lugged through the subway. And then it was some job application time, which, as we all know, is never a high point. Noted a little quote, blah. So there's like some pain and negative feelings there. And then closed out our timeline by joining this event, which is obviously a high point. This is awesome.
Clearly, yeah.
Opportunity to meet some new people.
That's great. An excellent job capturing a quote there too. That's great. So I'm curious, it sounds like, Alex, maybe were you the one who made this visual while another participant was talking?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for you to try to capture what she was saying? How much co-creation, was happening between the two of you?
So I feel like we started by, we did a couple passes through this, just adding more detail with each of those passes. So the first one, we just laid out some of the major points in time, and then we kind of started back again and set some emotional states throughout that timeline, and then went back one more time and filled in some of these tags. And this is where it was great. It's always awesome to have note takers in the interview and people listening. So you can kind of fill in some of those, like those quotes that I definitely missed. And so we filled in some of those details on that third pass.
Okay, so multiple of you served as note takers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And what did you notice just in the difference between the participant who talked you through this story, between when they were just sort of verbally speaking and then as you started capturing it?
I don't know. Can you give me some examples? What do you mean?
I'm curious if you were picking up on new things as you started capturing it with her instead of just sort of listening. How did the act of visually capturing it change the way that you were hearing things, if at all?
I'm not sure. I think it was, I have a really terrible memory and like I get very one track. And so I think it was helpful to kind of lay out some landmarks in the field and get a bird's eye view of what the day looked like. And then we could be more relaxed about going through individual events and picking up detail on those, rather than trying to capture as much information as humanly possible about a specific event and moving to the next one. And that also let us have a better idea of which ones we maybe wanted to go deeper on, which we wouldn't have if we were just going one by one.
I think my big curiosity and sort of measure of success of these things is, does it help us connect even though we're having this weird artificial remote kind of conversation? Did it help you guys connect or not?
I think so. This is a new tool for me. Most of my user research is like very informal conversations. And so in some ways I felt like this like both helped us connect and didn't, because it's a very formal process and you're asking questions that maybe you don't normally ask in an informal like conversation, like, was this happy face emoji or sad face emoji? But in other ways, like you mentioned, the co-creation and collaborating on that thing together can be really helpful.
Thanks. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. That's pretty cool. And the map looks great.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Do we have a group who went through method B, the environment sort of walking tour, that would like to share their experience?
I'll share.
Yeah, go ahead, Joyce.
So we had Rowan in our group again too, actually, but we had someone else that wanted to share her room. And what was interesting is that she explained like all the things that were in there, and she has a studio apartment. And so when she circled around, we were really getting to see like a big amount of like how there's so many rooms packed in one, but from her original laptop view, It definitely seemed a lot more minimalistic. She explained things like she had a lot of pillows and a lot of light, but from that first view, it just looked kind of more dark and kind of stale in comparison to everything that she had. And one of my favorite things that happened too, and that we noticed, was when she was circling her laptop and doing the walkthrough, she got really excited about pointing out her barn door that she had in her studio apartment because it was so unusual. But when she was listing things off, she didn't name it. And so it was something where we realized it was like, it's almost like when you give a disclaimer or try to explain something before they see it, like when you have a friend over and you want to explain why that random thing is there. Like she almost had to do that when she realized that the barn door was there when she was pointing it out. So that was kind of interesting through that process as well.
Yeah. Did you all talk about that moment?
Yeah, we all talked about how she seemed really excited to point it out, but like it was such a weird thing that she had to explain it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So I have the same question as before, which is, did this method of going through her whole space, did it help you feel like you were building a better connection with her?
Yeah, I think we didn't really visualize as well when she was just talking about the different things. Like one of the girls in the group also explained that when she said that she had a kitchen there, she didn't imagine it being those colors. So just kind of seeing a little bit more about her than what we were just imagining from her original point of view.
Yeah, I'm always really interested in when I'm doing research and hearing those stories that I might not have anticipated talking about a person with, or talking with a person about them, but they sort of come up just from, you know, the events or the things in the room. So it sounds like your group really had a great experience with that too. There was one person in the chat who might have also wanted to share a little bit. Sophie, you said you don't have an artifact, but did you want to also volunteer and describe kind of your experience with this activity?
Yeah, I thought it was fun just to have, you know, everybody like share what they got out of this when we were in the group and like what people noticed from what she was explaining, even after she showed her room.
Very cool.
Great. So, yeah, as we've seen and heard, I think there's some fairly simple methods and techniques to employ as we are as we're trying to build a little more empathy and understanding with our participants. So as we head into, as we start to move out of this session and reflect on the things that we've learned today, we've got some key takeaways for becoming a digital Sherlock. And the first is curiosity, which is watching for the surprising, the unnatural, the things like the way someone gets self-conscious talking about the barn door in their room, and being able to follow up with questions about that. The second is co-creation, asking participants to help you build understanding with you. We've talked about how that can empower participants to feel like an active partner. It can also empower you to feel like an active partner and help you test your own deductions, your own understanding, and check your own listening. And finally, being able to get beyond the curation into context, asking participants to show their space beyond what just kind of fits in our curated screen to help us build a deeper understanding of a person's environment. So with that, these simple methods really drive a lot of our work as designers and researchers. And so we hope that as you use them, you'll be well on your way to uncovering value and following the story and becoming digital Sherlocks of your own. So that's our methodologies for you all today, but we'd love to open up the floor for questions. I know there were some great questions already being asked in the chat. So if anyone has questions.
Yeah, Andrew actually had a question about seeing any cultural differences when it comes to the walking tours. And actually, I'm not sure if that was meant for us or for the folks kind of describing their experience with that activity. Did anybody notice? Is that something that came up, certain cultural differences when we saw people's spaces?
I'll give
So
you a bit. Oh.
the reason I ask is, so I am Asian American, and I know that at least in the Asian families that I've experienced, it's always you're in the formal living room and that's where you sit most of the time. Whereas more, at least in the American cultures, usually you get the tour of the entire house or whatever. So, and I was just wondering if it was different for other cultures.
That's a pretty interesting observation. I'll share one of my observations just going out in the field pre-COVID. There are certain cultures, or even just people's preferences, that you don't wear shoes in their house. So a lot of times I'll be out in the field, and I always tell my research, my colleagues who come with me, who maybe haven't been out in the field as much, wear socks that you're not embarrassed by. Don't have holes in your socks, and don't go in bare feet, because we have to be able to respect and walk through someone's space. And maybe culturally different or preference-wise different than what we have. So that's one thing that I've noticed,
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of give and take. As you go into the field to do research, you're really going into somebody else's space. And this is a little bit different in remote. You're still sort of trying to be invited into somebody else's space, but you're at a remove. And so something that we also try to do is let participants know very clearly, ahead of time, some of the questions we'll be asking, some of the things we'll be hoping to see, so that nothing gets taken, by surprise, or you sort of establish any of those differences, cultural or otherwise, up front, so that it can be sort of a mutually trusting and empathetic session. Yeah.
Awesome. Sophie has a ton of observations from what they did in their breakout group.
This is wonderful. Thanks, Sophie.
Sophie, do you want to sort of talk out loud to the group, kind of the things that you've experienced?
Sure. Sorry, I just typed that because I had made a little yip noise twice, and I'm sorry that I was trying to contribute without raising my blue virtual hand. But just apropos of culture, it seemed to me that for both of the people who presented, there was shyness happening. There was I'm reluctant to show my space. We also found that we had almost all of the ridiculous things that people had listed in the chat. By the end, we had partners, children, dogs. We didn't have knives, but it was really a stream of stuff, was really a stream of oddball stuff. And it's some of it is because these are spaces that we would never in a million years usually be interacting in our, with our colleagues in, right? I've got, a bunch of kids' drawings in a real messy fridge behind me right now.
I think it's quite humanizing, all the messiness and things that you're describing.
Yeah. Thanks.
When everybody brought their dogs in at the end. That's what I do too. My dog isn't with me today, but I love bringing my dog to meetings.
That's great.
Have you used this method of remote research on modernist projects, or how have you done it? Yes, we have done it. A lot of remote research, it doesn't quite feel the same way that we normally do design research. Our real goal is to get into people's space and really get a feel for the way they live their lives, the way they make decisions. And obviously we've just discussed all the limitations to doing that remotely. But I try to still create research agendas and research protocols that are as observational as possible. One method that we really like to do is diary studies. So we'll ask people sort of over time to send us, videos or photos, about the sort of subject area or industry that we're really curious about, and have them describe to us, exactly what we're seeing and why it's important to them. And that's really nice. It's a nice methodology because you kind of get an overtime picture of what people are doing, and really probe on the things that I think someone in the chat said something about, what do we forget that we see? I kind of want to attribute it because that was a really nice thought. I'm scrolling back up.
I think it was Lacey.
Yeah, I wonder how many things in our space that we no longer see because we see them all the time. It's really nice to get our participants, once they've sent us videos or photos, to kind of go back, and it might not be something that really, calls to them because they're so used to it, but it might be something that's very curious to us, and it might, spark a lot of really great design ideas just, because they have that in their space and it's part of their day-to-day life.
Seeing a question from Ryan who says, there are clear disadvantages, but what advantages do you find with doing design research virtually versus in person? Great question. A couple of things come to mind, and a major one from the research end is we have the ability to interview and conduct research with many more people. If we don't have to physically travel to somebody's home, sometimes our research programs will take us all around the country, and that is time consuming, is also expensive, either for the client or for us. And it can be really helpful to instead just set up conversations like this from where we all are, and it doesn't require travel on anybody's end. Similarly, being able to do sort of non-traditional research discussion times, for example, we're having this session in the evening, being able to do research at all times of day around the participants' schedules, and rather than sort of trying to cram everything into a quick travel schedule or within work hours in the same way. So there's a lot more flexibility from the researcher end, which is great. I think in terms of digital tools as well, some of what we're exploring with the artifact creation kind of gets to that sense of, for those people who are more comfortable at a little bit of a remove, there is something that can sometimes feel a little safer about digital research that can actually yield more insight than being in person would. And so there's some of that that happens as well. But
we had a question from Colin. Are there certain things you might implement at different times, depending on context, looking for something specific as opposed to something broader? I'm not entirely sure what you have in mind with that, but I will say that, yeah, we definitely adapt our methods depending on the context or depending on the goal of what we're trying to learn about other people. So that's why I sort of was describing all of these methods and suggestions as kind of tools in the toolkit. One thing that we've had to be this year, especially this year, but always, honestly, when we're doing research, is adaptable. And so the different ways that you can flex methodologies or ways of connecting to people in different sorts of contexts, whether it's remotely or in person, the stronger you will be as a researcher. And I think the stronger that we all are in kind of connecting with each other in whatever kind of capacities we need to do it, whether it's for meetings or, talking with friends and family or actually doing research with participants. I think there's a lot of room now to be creative with the ways in which we're kind of being asked to connect.
Mm-hmm. So we've also got a question from Lacey here saying, do you find that charting in this way can be complicated when you're asking focused questions around a specific topic versus asking around the process of actions across a day or a task? So I think by charting, Lacey, maybe what you're talking about is the kind of journey map graphic that we did as part of method A. And yes, I think there's different forms of co-creative artifacts that work better based on the level of specificity that you're going for. So something like the chart that Alex's group showed us with the, the different kind of quotes and feelings throughout the day, that can work, that sort of journey map can work really well as a process thing, talking me through the process of how do you make a choice to buy a new dishwasher, or how do you make a choice about how to send, what is your child's day going through or the school day look like, that sort of that journey process will work really well there. Other sorts of artifacts may work better for something that is delving into the details of a specific problem. And maybe that's you're both on a Miro board working with sticky notes, or any sort of deeper dive kind of data visualization that way. So I think the idea there is that is one. Empathy mapping, yeah. Affinity mapping. There's a variety of different artifacts and tools you can use within the larger umbrella of how do you get someone to co-create this with you? How do you get it away from just a face-to-face conversation and into building an artifact together?
And I would say it doesn't even have to be something formal or that results in an artifact. I know one group, was a little self-conscious in the chat because they hadn't produced an artifact. It's totally fine. Mm-hmm. One thing that we do in the field that I still think would work remotely is just the question "show me" is one of your most powerful questions in research. So if someone's describing something, a process, or the way they keep their receipts in a shoebox, the question always is, well, can you show me? And then you're kind of looking at that thing together. And I think that's another way of minimizing that self-consciousness and getting the stories that we're looking for. There's really rich participant insights into how they're living their lives. what has been a challenge with a project or a situation, and how did you overcome that obstacle working in design research remotely? There's a lot. But one thing I'll say in terms of research in general, and especially with remote research, is kind of building that rapport and trust that you need to get for people to really open up with you. You really need to earn that trust, and that's totally understandable. I think with remote research, it can be a little bit harder just because you're not face to face with a person. I think there's something instinctual about being face to face with a person that kind of like makes you trust them a little bit more. The way we've gotten around that is just enormous transparency and over communication with our participants, being available to them whenever they have questions. These sound like, you know, pretty standard answers, and it's something that we strive to do no matter what research that we're doing. But I think in a remote context, it heightens it even more, just so they can, you know, really see you as a person instead of someone who is trying to get something from them per se.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Sophie says, is it a confounding factor that you might get a wider range of people and locations doing remote versus physical? I'm attending ADW from Brooklyn. Yeah, hello, Brooklyn.
I moved here from Brooklyn a long time
ago. Confounding. I'm not sure what confounding factor means here, but I do think that a wider range of people and locations, I think, is largely a positive. And of course, that will have to tie in with the way that you write your criteria, you know, exactly the kinds of people that you're trying to find and who makes sense to interview. But by and large, I think the recruitment pool becomes a lot bigger, which is great, as recruitment is one of the top challenges for effective research. Yeah.
Maybe one or two more questions and then we can start winding down. I know everybody's got a full evening ahead of them.
Yeah.
Colin says, I'm curious, is there a reason you chose to host this event while being in the same room? Fair enough. You can see that we have the same art behind us.
Are we in the same room?
Yeah. We chose not to use the ADW background just because it wouldn't be fair if we're using that and everybody else is not. But yeah, Catherine and I work really closely together. So we're sort of in the same COVID bubble, as it were. So we felt, you know, safe enough working together in this room. And beyond that, there's no real strategic reason, except that technically it's a lot easier if there's some technical issues to be troubleshooting, you know, kind of from the same room. We ran an event last month as well, and I think we learned a lot from our, you know, there's a whole other world of running remote, you know, events as well as running remote research. So we just wanted everything to run smoothly for y'all. So that's why.
But nice job to the Sherlocks among you who picked up that we were in the same room with the same background. So good observation skills. Yeah.
I think one more.
Yeah.
How does the context environment translate from pure observation to insight? Do you ever find yourself making or checking assumptions live? You want to take it? Let me do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good question. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I would say that context and environment kind of act as data. So when we're out in the field or when we're doing remote research, you know, we're trying not to bring in our assumptions. We're trying not to come in with a point of view, and we're trying to just sort of absorb everything that comes in. Once we get all of that, whether it's quotes or photos or artifacts or observations about the environment, we take that and start trying to understand what the meaning behind those things are. Are we seeing that among multiple participants? Is it an outlier? And, you know, we're not trying to sort of, you know, find the average or statistically significant answer. We're trying to find inspiration for design. And so all of this, you know, kind of comes in and we're able to kind of spark ideas off of that. We try not to make assumptions about people or the data that we're getting, but once it, you know, kind of moves into that ideation territory, then, you know, we're sort of, you know, bringing in our own perspective and kind of getting more imaginative than necessarily trying to, you know, keep our data super clean. Mm-hmm. That said, once we kind of create something, you know, research isn't a once and done situation. It's something that we keep bringing back to the types of people that, you know, we're really trying to serve, so that if there are assumptions that got baked in that are wrong, or things that we did that were, you know, sort of bad decisions based on either bad observations or just our interpretation of them, you know, we're going to find those out through that iterative process of bringing things back, or even co-creating at the time. All right.
So we're coming up on time here. So thanks all for your questions. We would love to stay in touch with you all. So if you want to stay in touch with us, have any more follow-up questions for us, want to keep the conversation going, feel free to send us your email. You can send that via the kind of Zoom DM here. And also feel free to check us out at moderniststudio.com for more of our research around these methods and others. We'd love to stay in touch. So do, again, send us your emails. Find us at moderniststudio.com. Laura and I are also both on LinkedIn. And thank you so much. And we will turn it back over to the Austin Design Week host now.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. We have our volunteer in the chat send the feedback survey and a little thank you to all of you. So I encourage you to join the Slack and